Welcome to the Positively You podcast. I'm your host, Jessie Larson, and I'm passionate about helping you shift the way you think so you can create a life you're absolutely obsessed with. Each week, I'll be bringing you a guest or a thought that's going to help you feel more optimistic and equipped to take real action. Get ready to push past limiting beliefs, ditch that negativity, and start showing up as the best and most positive version of you. Girl, let's do this. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Positively You podcast. Today's episode is very special. It's actually a recording of our January book club. So if you were unable to make it to our live meeting or didn't have a chance to read or finish the book but wanted to gain some of the insights and takeaways that those of us inside the book club had, today is your lucky day. It was an absolutely amazing conversation. I loved every little insight and experience that the wonderful women who showed up brought, and definitely wanted to share it here on the podcast with our Positively You community. So we're just going to dive right in. I hope that you really enjoy this episode and our takeaways from the January book, The Kindness Method by Shahroo Izadi. Okay, I cheated. I didn't cheat. I listened to it on Audible. Are you guys listeners or book readers?
I've been listening because it's just easy. I work full time with 4 boys. So it's just simply easier for me to listen on Audible, like when I'm taking my 15-minute walk. So I've gotten to chapter 5 and I'm a little nervous to go too far beyond because I want to be able to do the exercises in chapter 4 and 5 before and then I'll just get overwhelmed. So I kind of stopped right there.
Thank the heavens that there is Audible now and ways to listen to books, because otherwise I would still be not reading any. So I'm so glad we have that.
For real.
So Andy, you finished it, right? Do you mind unmuting yourself if you want to and letting me know just your overview and recap or thoughts now that you finished the book all the way?
Yeah. So I read it all. I listened to it all the way through. So I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to it all the way through, not worry about doing the practices. And then I was going to go back and do the practices. I'm hoping I was actually just going onto the Audible site because I meant to do this a few days ago, but I have not got around to it. Because sometimes if you go to the Audible site, they will have the PDF, extra things. So I was hoping that maybe they had the practices attached there. I will look right now and see. Have you guys looked? Does anyone know if they're there?
I was going to say, I didn't look there. So Andy, if you want to look and let me know, but
I'll look and see. Yeah.
I did find them on Scribd, and it has all of the maps out there. So you can kind of look at her example maps and everything. Since
that'd be awesome.
They're in the book if you're reading them, but since we're all Audible people, that's how you can go ahead.
It doesn't look like they're on the Audible site because usually they're just right there. It's they're not there.
So I didn't see them, but Scribd has them. They're just behind, as you're scrolling down through the site, it'll have an ad, and then it'll have a little 10-second countdown, and then it'll pop up. So they're all right there for you, which I really liked. And then there was a couple, honestly, if you Google the Kindness Method PDF, there will be some that pop up of just examples. But I kind of also like not looking at examples because I feel like sometimes I use those and then get into my head of the things I'm supposed to write down and stuff like that. So use it a little bit, but also if you just listened and go back and push pause and then write down the things that she tells you to write down, you'll be great. So
yeah.
Okay. So besides that, Andy, you went through, listened to everything. Other immediate thoughts, or as you're done, what's your recap?
It was a really kind of an interesting take on changing habits, and I loved how she just made it. So we always want to jump ahead to these massive goals and, immediately change everything about ourselves. And I like how she breaks it down to let's start with this little tiny baby step first and then master that and then move on. And then also really understanding what's driving us from those backslides. That was the biggest thing is let's get real clear about why this isn't sticking and why you continually make the same goals over and over again and have to start all over again. So I loved that. I thought that was really cool to kind of dive in and be like, okay, what is it really that's like, what are those triggers of like, especially when it comes, I love that, everyone is thinking about losing weight this time of year. But it was good to like, I'm like, okay, yeah, I know. Like, I know if it doesn't really, for a while, like I knew donuts were a trigger food for me. I can't eat them anymore because of the gluten. But like for a while, like anytime I ate a donut, it was like I couldn't just eat one. I was eating half the box. And then I was like, oh shit, I just screwed it. Like might as well just like just go hog wild, right? So it was just like a gateway drug for me, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting.
I'm going to cut you really quick because I want to
please
piggyback on that. When she talks about, I don't know where everyone is if you haven't finished the book all the way, but she talks about the difference between a lapse and a relapse. And I think that that's like exactly what you're talking about when it's like, oh my gosh, I just had this donut and now I had this one and this one and this one. And all of a sudden you're like, well, I'm all the way off the train. And that's like a relapse where you go all the way back to the beginning instead of just letting it be like a lapse of like, okay, cool. I just had a whole bunch of donuts. Great. Like,
great.
And not
I
letting
felt
it
terrible.
Yeah. And so I really liked that. Obviously, a lot of her book focuses on, she deals with a lot of people like trying to get sober and like alcoholism. And then her personal thing is like food. But obviously you can take everything in and take that. But relapse is a big word, especially in like the alcohol world. But I really, really did like that just perspective change of relapse versus lapse. Like we're all going to have lapses in our life. Like we're never going to be on a straight trajectory upward and forward. It's just not how life works. But we're so funny where like we make all of these like little mistakes or little like steps off of our path mean so much more, where it's like, we'll burn the whole house down. And just like that shift alone of like, okay, cool. I stepped off for a second, right back on. And it doesn't have to be this like whole big deal.
Yeah.
That was a big chapter for me. I don't remember what chapter it was, but that was a good one.
I don't remember either. But I was like, and I used to say this all the time too when I was coaching people. I'm like, just because you got a flat tire doesn't mean you're going to go slash all three.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. I'm going to steal
fix the tire and get back to it.
That's so good.
Yeah, I actually, Andy, too. Here's my little notebook of notes.
I love it. I should take notes because they were so good. But I was usually listening into, I was like doing my red light therapy. So I couldn't
Do
really
you know how
notes.
hard it is to take notes when you're listening because you push pause and then you try to write as fast as you can? This is why you should
I almost went and got the physical. Yeah, I almost went and got the physical book on this one because normally I'm like, listening is great and I don't need the physical book, but I feel like this one you kind of almost want the physical book.
Yeah,
as well.
It's one that even now that we're done, I still might go back and get because there's so many things I want to go back through and highlight. So if you do have you have it, Valerie, you have the physical book.
I do. I vacillate back and forth between Audible and a physical book.
Yes.
But when I saw that you were for the book club, I was like, I think I need to get the actual physical copy.
Yeah.
And again, sorry, I'm not done with it, ladies, but
No.
I will be. But I'm such a visual person, but Audible has been great because I love to get my movement in. So I go back and forth. Usually.
Yes. And I love the Audible, especially when it is the author reading it. Me and Andy already talked about this, how we like her British accent and her different words, like 8 stone. I'm like, I don't even know how much 8 stone is, but good for you for losing it.
I Googled it. 1 stone is 14 pounds, people.
Oh, wow.
So she lost a lot of weight.
She lost a lot of weight.
Yeah, I immediately Googled it.
Okay, of course you did. That's incredible. Because I'm like, cool, 8 pounds. Nope, 8 stone. That's huge.
So it's 8 stone. So 8 times 14. That's like at least 80 pounds. So
none of us are going to do that math. It's over 80 pounds.
I know. Like,
it's over 80 pounds.
Not that quick.
I'll Google it, but I won't do the math.
Yeah, we're not doing that. But I did write something down from I think it was in chapter 2, because that's what I wrote. But it said, in the context of changing habits, being kind to yourself is remembering at all times that you deserve to live your best possible life. And I just like that. I liked that it was these, Andy, like you said, we try to do these big overhauls. And I like that it's just this little change. And so often when we make those changes, we come at it of a place, especially like New Year, like you said, New Year's weight loss is on a lot of our minds. I don't know what everyone else's goals are. We can kind of talk about that too. But so often we come at it of like this change of like wanting to like, oh, I don't want to be that anymore. Right. Like it's this thing. And instead just even that shift of like not moving away from something, but moving towards something is such a like a tiny little shift in your brain, but has a huge impact. Which is like a big reason why I was drawn to this book. Can I tell you, by the way, the pressure it is, and it's like totally self-imposed pressure to pick out a book for everybody to read because I'm like, what if it's bad?
I'm
What if everyone
sure.
hates it? And so I'm glad that there's been, there was things I loved about this book, and there was things that I was like, I'll throw that out. I don't really need that. But yeah, okay. So I don't want to monopolize. So anyone else where you're at, anything big that stuck out? I know if you haven't finished the book already, you've still got a lot of good insight. So feel free to jump in, and then I'll post some more questions in a second if anyone wants to share.
So I got to, just on Audible, I got to chapter 5, which I think is I think that
Ways
we're
I'm
supposed
happy
to
to
make a map
be.
of that. Ways I'm happy to be. Yeah, that's
Yes.
it. So
Yep.
I had gotten to there, and then like I said, I kind of stopped because I was like, I really want to do these, and I hadn't really thought about just listening to the whole thing and then doing the exercises later, Andy, which was like a good idea. So I suppose I can always do that. So I at this point have been doing a lot of work with regards to like habit changing because obviously I feel like most of us, and especially being like a full-time working mom of like 4 boys, I'm just so bad at, and I know I shouldn't say it like that, but starting something and then just not following through and then getting really, really upset with myself because I started something and then I didn't follow through. So I'm really trying to kind of like lean into that and figure out exactly where my holdups are. And there were so many aha moments from the book that I have kind of started applying just to even other people in my life. Like, for example, the Overeaters Anonymous, when because at first when she was saying like, oh, this is a lot about addiction, I'm in psychology, right? So addiction is kind of like my jam too. Like so I'm understanding what she's saying. And then when she started saying like Overeaters Anonymous, and she said, but they are the only type of addiction that you still have to expose yourself to the addiction. I was like, oh, that's mind blowing to me because I feel like a lot of the times when we're trying just to abstain from something completely and not fall off that, like mine is sugar, like my crux is just sugar. Like I cannot abstain from it. So, and so then I was kind of like, okay, well, that makes sense, right? Because it's not as easy as maybe, and not that it's easy, but it's not as easy for me, especially since I have 4 young boys and we kind of use food as a way of connecting with each other during family dinners, family movie time, right? That's huge. Like I'll make these fun little, like scavenger hunts for us. And then we'll have like Sundays on Sunday, right? Sugar, sugar, sugar. And then she kind of talked about a lot, which I know from psychology, but she had reminded me of finding a competing behavior so that you don't necessarily feel as though you're missing out. And then that just kind of proves to be more successful. So instead of sitting there eating a whole Sunday on Sunday with my kids, I suppose like I could just do something that's even a little bit healthier. And so there were a lot of those little aha moments where I thought, that's right, this is like simple. And it's not, again, not super simple, but this is everything that you learn in behavioral psychology, competing behaviors, addiction therapy, all of that. So there were a lot of really aha moments. And I called my husband and I'm like, you have got to listen to this book. I'm like, it's amazing. I've had so many like pivotal, like, oh my gosh, moments. And the way from the psychological perspective that she is working with her clients with regards to behavioral change was like, again, I was like, oh my gosh, there are so many people I know that would benefit from this type of work. Whereas sometimes I feel like it becomes more clinical, whereas she almost takes like the functional medical practitioner approach of like, we're going to get to the root of really what's, going on there. I thought that it was really interesting in the book when she was working with her therapist and her therapist said, well, like, what if you just never lose weight? And she was like, outraged by the fact that of course I'm going to lose weight. But what she was trying to say was don't wait for your life to start. You can still go on dates if you're not at your ideal weight. You can still, borrow coats from friends if you're not at your ideal weight. So that was a really good like aha moment for me as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really cool. And I love the insight that you have from like the psychology standpoint. What I loved about this book so much is that she says this multiple times in it, is that this isn't like the plan for your habits. It's like that structure behind it. Because we have all, and that's why this one was so different from a lot of other like self-help books we read, because the other ones have like the tangible steps and the things you need to do and follow XYZ, and stack this habit on top of this habit, but then we fall off and it's like, well, why can't I keep doing the habit? Where this is like the behavior change behind before you even get started on the habit. And I think that so often that's what we're missing. Um, and so this has been really cool to be like, oh, let's read this before we jump in and make the plan. Like this helps you make the plan and then come back to the plan when you inevitably veer from the plan a little bit.
And didn't your podcast yesterday, Jesse? I listened to it, and was it her? Oh, I'm blanking on her name, but she was wonderful. 100 days for a
Okay, that
goal.
I was like, yeah, Kelly France, one goal for 100 days.
Yeah. Okay, so the one goal for 100 days, and didn't she say something like you have to have? Uh, the vocabulary is escaping me. Executive functioning at kids and age. I don't know what's going on.
You're good.
But she said like you have to kind of have a prep week where you
Yeah.
just take an entire week like to prep, which I
Mhm.
feel like was almost reinforcing like this book, because she was like, you're right. Because she said several times, if you're anything like me, you just want to jump to the mapping, but you need to kind of do the work before you
Yeah.
get there, or you're just going to get the same results. So I loved that part of it, because I think that the reason that we're probably all reading it is because we're ready for like a change. And so that was something that I never did. Like in my experience, I've created a vision board, but I never really took much thought to say, what happens like when the kids all have the stomach bug?
Yeah.
What happens? What do I do? How do I keep myself on track with that? And so that the moment of preparation, and I've never really done the prep work needed, I feel, to really kind of lean into like my changes. So that was really like mind blown moment.
Yeah. I think so many of us don't do that prep work, right? We wait and wait and wait until we're at that point of we're so frustrated that it's like we're going to change. And so it's like you throw everything out. We do, the juice cleanses and the 75 hard and all of the things because we're so at that point where we're frustrated that we don't give ourselves that grace and compassion to set the foundation. We're just like, I don't want to pour the cement. I don't want to put in the supports. I just want to build a stupid house. And then the house falls down, right? Because we didn't do that. And so I think we're not alone in skipping that part. Orientation week is the verbiage that she used for
That's
that first
perfect.
one. And I
Thank
liked that
you.
because she gave if you haven't listened to that episode yet, she gives herself like permission as she sets a new goal to kind of like try it out for a week. Cause so often hers was that she wanted to run a half marathon and then got like planning into doing it. And she's like, I actually don't want to run multiple hours a week.
That
The
was
goal was a
my
shiny goal that she thought she wanted and then didn't. And giving yourself room to kind of like test it out was kind of cool. And I think it brings in that compassion of being able to say, like, to walk back, right? Like sometimes we say a goal, we proclaim it because we're told that we need accountability. So we need to proclaim it. And then when you fall off, you're like, oh, I can't walk it back. So that was a really cool kind of compassionate thing to be like, oh, actually, maybe this isn't it, or maybe I need to go back to the drawing board a little bit. Anyone else who is either finished or has had an insight somewhere where they're at, hop on in, share. Val, I want to know where you're at, like chapter 5, or Chelsea. Chelsea, have you finished or are you still in it?
I'm on chapter 10.
Okay,
So
so you're close.
I'm listening. So I didn't see how chapters there are, how far, but some insights that I've had, and I love because it actually coordinated with what I'm discovering in counseling right now, is I have this core negative belief that I'm not deserving. And I realized that it was impacting, I didn't realize how it was impacting my goals until reading this book. And, she talks a lot about weight loss and stuff. And I realized that the majority of my life, up until this year, I held on weight, and I kind of knew this before, but I love that this book just reiterated that and just helped my brain understand it in a different way as well, of like, I was holding weight on to not only help me keep myself safe, but I didn't feel deserving enough to let go of that weight and shed that weight. And so I can't remember what exercise it was. Anyways, one of the exercises I was doing in the mapping, I realized, oh my goodness, that key component of feeling like I am deserving of those goals. And I can choose myself rather than everything else that gets in the way. Right.
Yeah.
And so that was the aha moment that I had of like, okay. And now I get to focus on continuing to heal that. And, but being mindful and aware that that's there, it's helping me acknowledge that when that comes up, and helps, what does she call it? Instead of like falling off, you guys were just talking about it.
Lapse and relapse. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Just being able to, instead of totally letting go of your goal and, falling apart, being able to jump back on and be like, no, like, yes, I fell short at today or whatever, but I can hop back on.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, I really like that. I also, as you were saying that, it reminded me of Trina, something you were saying as well, when you're like, I start things and then I don't finish them, or start things and don't finish them. Not to plug my own podcast again, but I did an episode about this a little bit ago about giving yourself credit for the 30% that you do, right? Because sometimes you didn't complete it 100%, but you also didn't do 0. And I think so often we think that sometimes, where it's like, okay, I did have proof that like I got started. I do have proof that like I can hold out. So I can do it. And focusing more on the fact that like I can do it. Like, yes, I fell off, but I did get started. And I did go farther than just 0%. And we don't give ourselves that credit sometimes. And I think if we can start noticing those wins more than the negatives, is a huge shift. We know this. We know it's not all or nothing. We know it's progress over perfection. We get this message pounded into us, but it's so hard to break. And I think that that's important with those lapses and with those relapses, right? And Chelsea, oh my gosh, I'm so happy for that like aha moment that you've had. That's such a cool moment to feel. I mean, it's kind of hard sometimes when you realize that that's the way you've been talking to yourself or treating yourself, that you're like, ouch, I wouldn't tell someone else they're not deserving of something. Right. But when you can have that moment with yourself to be like, I deserve this. Like, oh, it's a beautiful moment. So I'm happy you've had that aha moment for yourself.
Yeah.
I also just re-listened to chapter 10 with where you're at, and chapter 9 and chapter 10. Chapter 9 is conversations about me, and chapter 10 is someone I love. And the maps, if you're not to that point yet, is conversations about me is kind of where you write down the things that you're saying to yourself all of the time. And she does a thing where she calls it the paperclip challenge, where you start your day with like I don't know, 30 paper clips or something. And then every time you say something negative or just whatever conversation you have about yourself, you make a notice of them. And then the next map is someone I love. And it's the things that you would say to someone you love about their goals or when they fall off and things like that. And then you compare the two and how different that can be, to have how self-deprecating and how mean your conversations about yourself can be versus the ones for someone I love. And then taking those and being like, okay, how do we like make this one more this one? She had, I'm going to pull out my notes again. 3 words that I really liked were investigation, observation, and curiosity. And I think that that's what this whole method really is it's more awareness, it's more conversations with yourself, and not letting these just be like these background conversations that we have that we don't even like subconsciously really subscribe to, but really stopping and being like, whoa, that was a mean thought that just came through my head about myself. And instead of making that mean something, just getting curious about it and being like, why did I just think that really like mean thought about myself instead of just being like, that's a true thought. Anyway, it's given me so much to think about. I love this book.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, so Chelsea started doing the maps. Valerie, have you done any of the maps yourself? Are you working through it as you're going through, or are you kind of just jumping in?
I'm just jumping in, ladies. But I have to tell you, like everything that you girls are saying, it resonates so much. I am such a all or nothing person. So I know that this book is going to be so beneficial for me because and I do have like an addictive personality, not with like addiction or anything like that, but I'm just such a go-getter. But I never lay that foundation, Jesse. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm always like, let me just have the house. And then obviously if there's no foundation, it's never going to actually uphold, right? So that's why like and I'm everyone else's cheerleader. So when you're just talking about like that map with the paper clips and all that, I really need to do that because I definitely am hardest on myself more than anybody else. I like think so many wonderful things about so many people and really, really need to like dive deep into why I'm so hard on myself and not on others.
Yeah.
So I need to like really, really implement and do all these maps because I know like I'm taking a deep breath because I know it will be so, so helpful.
Yeah. Absolutely. I actually, as I haven't done the maps yet because I did the same thing as Andy, where I just kind of wanted to get through the book and then go back and do them. And so I've pulled up the PDFs. I've kind of wanted to go through. But as I was listening, there was a couple of them where I was like, I don't want to do that map. Like, that doesn't sound good. It's kind of the ones that were like the snapshot letter, even of like, or what happens if you don't change, what hasn't worked. And it's like kind of more like negative, maybe. It's like really shining a light on not like just happiness. And I was kind of like, maybe we'll just skip that map. I don't really want to do that. And I had this thought of the difference between nice and kind. And being nice to myself would be just like ignoring those. Like, we don't need to talk about why I haven't done it. We just need to focus on like where I want to go and what I need to do. And I just kept having this like thought about the difference between nice and kind. And nice is when, you let yourself off. You say, I deserve, whatever. It's okay if I fall off the wagon. It's okay. Like you just are nice to yourself. And kind is having those hard conversations sometimes, is shining the light in those shadowy areas and really looking into like, okay, why do I keep restarting at this? Or why can't I not like stay on this? And so like kindness can sometimes encompass those like hard conversations and not feel very nice in the moment, but like kindness is pushing through and really having those conversations with yourself and really being aware and being open to like looking at, your flaws and looking at your temptations and your triggers and all of those things that you might just want to be like, no, 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 we're just going to put rose-colored glasses on and go through our life and be all happy and set this like cute little foundation. It really is, we have to kind of do both. And I did feel resistance to that at first, where I was like, that doesn't feel very nice because it's not, it's kind, it's not nice.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
But I think the kindest thing you can do is look at those things with grace, with compassion, and be like, yeah, I mess up here. This is the big place where I fall down. But how can I see that through the lens of being kind? And how can I see that differently and pivot and give myself grace so that if this happens again, it doesn't unravel everything?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I think that Brene Brown says, it makes sense in my head where I'm going with this. Okay. Brene Brown says clear is kind, and that's in like communicating with others. But I also think that that's in looking at yourself, because in order to get clear on everything, we do have to, turn over the rocks and look in the closets and the shadows and the things that we don't want to and have those conversations. That's where we can get that clarity. And that's where that kindness comes in. So sometimes it's hard work. And we just, like we've said, we want to just jump in and go 100%, but the kind thing to do is really slowing down, taking that time. Trina, you mentioned like, if the kids all have the stomach flu and the things that I can do, I talk about this all the time. Probably if you listen to the podcast or anything, that I'm always like, make your goal smaller, make it smaller, make it smaller. Because, what can you do every single day that you can hit those things so that you're building that confidence and that you're continuing to go. And I think that she's even talked about that a little bit in this book of like, what's that like baseline thing that you can do so that you're not completely like having lapses and relapses. Okay, with the kindness method, I had a couple of book recommendations. Well, not even a couple. I had one other one that I'd read a couple of years ago that I really loved, that I'll share. I'll put it in the chat too. It's called Good Morning, I Love You. My therapist recommended it to me and I absolutely loved it. It's a book on self-compassion. Basically, the premise is telling yourself good morning, I love you every morning. And then obviously there's a whole book written about it, but that's like the main thing. And this has nothing to do with the book that we've read right now, but I think that that is incredibly a really cool practice of saying, just looking at yourself and telling yourself that you love yourself. You don't have to come up with like any crazy affirmations. You don't have to come up with anything. I know affirmations, especially for me, sometimes they can feel very fake, or like I don't believe them. And so it's just kind of like, hey, I'm doing this silly little practice because they told me it would help and then it doesn't. Just that simple act of just saying, I love you. And if you don't believe that, saying, I want to love you, I'm working on loving you, right? Meet yourself where you are at with that and feeling it grow. And then one day you'll wake up and be like, I love myself. What? And it's like super cool to like see those things come in. So kind of an off topic thing, but I wanted to share that book. It was really, really good. If you're looking for more of in this same kind of vein of self-compassion and kindness towards yourself. So yeah. Any other insights from anybody or want to share? Hop in.
So the only other insight that I wanted to share that I had kind of when I was reading the book along the lines of the whole self-compassion, Jesse, that you were just talking about and that Chelsea was kind of touching on, was that in a way, okay, so just in taking the self-compassion like full throttle, sometimes I don't always feel as though it's our fault, like speaking from a psychology perspective, that in a way we are so negative to ourselves, because I feel like if you are negative to someone in your life, so for example, if you walk up to your best friend and you're like, you look fat in that dress, there is a consequence for that, right? Like a very natural consequence, which is she'll probably get really angry with you and she won't want to be your friend anymore, right? Because you're a jerk to her. But
right.
when we do that to ourselves, it's up to us to provide that discipline for ourselves, right? Which we don't do. And so we aren't always aware and we don't always have an immediate like feedback loop of, okay, I just said this negative thing to myself. And so maybe in a couple of days we'll experience like stress and anxiety. And so sometimes I feel like, especially like depending on what generation you grew up in, it was a lot of like School of Hard Knocks, spare the rod, spoil the child. So we learned in a way, and not by any fault of necessarily society or our parents. I feel like everybody is just really doing the best they can. But I feel like we learned that the way you change behavior is to be negative. And right now, like in psychology and for years and years and years, and especially in education, there's this big, big push between like, positive behavior, right? Positive behavior and implementing that and focusing on the good. But for a while it was all, well, this, bad things get bad things and good things get good things. And so in a way, I kind of feel like it's no wonder that we're all walking around here saying, I look really fat in this dress, because we're trying to change our behavior in our minds. It's a negative thing. And we're not giving ourselves consequence like, oh, I just said something bad about myself. I'm going to go put myself on timeout for 5 minutes, right? Like we're not giving ourselves, we're not really seeing that negativity. And so I kind of had this aha moment where I was like, well, if I want to take this compassion completely, it's almost like, it's no wonder that everyone is walking around here just being their own worst enemy. But I feel like acknowledging that and kind of understanding that has almost given me a little bit more of an insight into like, okay, but now we know what we know. And once you know something, you can't unknow it, right?
Right.
So now we kind of try to do better. Like maybe this is what I was brought up with, or, however you were kind of parented or whatever happened. But there's just so much data and research saying that that's not really the best way to change behavior, and that there's a lot of other good ways to do it. So that was the other insight that I had. And as a matter of fact, I was saying to my QMate this morning, because she made a really derogatory comment about herself. And I was like, now, would you say that to me? And she's like, of course I wouldn't. And I'm like, why? And she's like, well, because I won't want to hurt your feelings. And I'm like, ah. And I'm like, and why wouldn't you want to hurt my feelings? And she was like, well, because, obviously I won't want to hurt you. I love you. And I won't want you to stop being my friend. And I was like, aha. So there's the consequence that would be rendered. But we don't have that as a form of like self-discipline. So that was another moment that I had. And I'm like, aha, this is all making sense now.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I love that insight about
cool.
those consequences. And she kind of talks about that a little bit with the paperclip challenge, where she's like, you transfer the paperclip so you like that you're having a visual. So you'll get to that. But again, it's not like a consequence of like, you're going to lose a friend, or you're going to have someone talking bad about you, or, that's a really interesting thing. I think it's also cool to kind of dive in to be like, okay, there's got to be a consequence though. Like I might not notice it. It might not be that like I've lost a friendship, but like there is a consequence there of me talking negatively.
Yes.
And like, what is it? And diving into that a little bit. That's really, really interesting. I had another insight while you were saying, oh, yes, just acknowledging that like that's the world that we've grown up in, right? It's so much easier to find those negative things. I had the visual of the movie Mean Girls when they're all standing in the mirror and they're like picking apart themselves, and she doesn't know what to do. And she's like, I don't know, what does she even say? They're like, my nail beds suck.
My
hips
breath stinks.
Oh yeah, my breath stinks in the morning. Like
Yeah.
that's just kind of what it reminded me of, where like it's almost like a connecting thing, right? It's easier to connect with each other about our frustrations and our problems, even like just in our day-to-day lives. Like, oh, life is busy, life is hard. Even we were doing this just very like, we've all got 4 kids. Like, instead of being like, life is amazing, I feel so good, it's so much easier to kind of go towards those negative things. So like you said, Trina, it's no wonder that we have a hard time with this, because it's so like subconsciously ingrained in just how we live.
Agreed. That negativity bias that we all just
Yeah.
that's ingrained within us too. That's like part of us when we were like cavemen and cavewomen. That's how we survived. And now we just have all of these instincts, but like no place to apply it. And so changing that behavior is difficult, but I feel like hopeful, I think. And I feel like too, if you're able to kind of make a tribe of people that are very like hyping you up and almost kind of like holding you accountable, like, hey, now, is that any way you want to talk to yourself? Because, you'll be seeing a consequence of that or whatever. I happen to have a really, really nice, wonderful group of people that I've met actually through work that are just like the kindest, sweetest people, and will come together and say things like, we are so like we'll complain about things like the weather or, something or whatever. But all in all, there's a lot of ways that we all kind of point out the blessings in others. And I really have never had that experience before prior to coming here. And so now that I do, it's just amazing the way that connection can kind of affect you if you kind of surround yourself with people who allow you to kind of see like the light, in your life, which is difficult to do, because then I don't think that you want to take on like a positive, like toxic positivity role and be like, oh, well, don't worry about that because your life is wonderful and look at this. So there's always that very delicate balance that you kind of have to strike with others between validation, but also seeking out the blessings. It's tough. It's not easy to do. None of this is easy to do. It's all difficult work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all difficult work. And I would say, but it's all work that is worth it.
Yes.
It's so worth it to sit here, even though sometimes I say this all the time. Andy knows this because I've said it to her before, where I'm like, I would just like to go back and be like naive and like not know and just like go through life really easily. Once you start having these like conversations with yourself and you start becoming more aware and you start like noticing those triggers a little bit quicker, it's, sometimes you're like, I wish I didn't actually know that about myself. I'd rather just like, zone out and whatever. But it's worth it even when it's hard. And that's part of why I wanted to have this book club. Trina, like you're saying, you've got a group of people around you in work and things like that. And the more that we can cultivate these good environments around us, not just within us, I think is really imperative. So I wanted to say thank you to those of you that hopped on today and read the book and wanted to be part of this book club. Thank you for hanging out with me again today. I'm so glad you pressed play. If you want to take a quick second to share this episode with someone you think would love it too, that would be amazing. If you're loving the show, make sure you go and leave a review on iTunes. Reviews are like magic for podcasts, and your review will help get this show into the ears of more amazing women just like you. And come find me over on Instagram. I'm there at positively.jessie, and I cannot wait to hang out with you some more. So until next time, have an amazing week.